In the thumbnail picture, you might have seen there was a bunch of bubbles up top. It's something that I know in my own store, my own tanks, definitely means needs attention. When you see a bunch of foam or bubbles on the top of water, no matter if it's the ocean, a river, your aquarium, it means something's going on. But in our aquarium, typically it's one of a couple of causes, and that would be, one would be meds. Meds are a very common one, things like praziquantel, Prazipro, Melafix, Pimafix. There's a few other that they tend to foam up, and because they cause a different viscosity of the water, basically. As we add soap to water, we get bubbles, right? Kind of the same thing. Some of these medicines change the properties of water, especially if an air stone, make a lot of bubbles, and they don't pop nearly as fast as water that didn't have that. But if you don't have that, a lot of times it could mean you have excess ammonia. Ammonia will also do that. If there's a lot of ammonia in the water, you'll see this frothing or the bubbles. Another one, someone was asking about hair algae. So when you see hair algae, what does that mean? The most common things are going to be an imbalance in your aquarium. If you have hair algae, which is kind of a longer algae that looks like hair, right? That's why we call it hair algae. It's going to grow on plants, or it's going to grow on decorations. Typically, we have excess of a nutrient, and one of the biggest culprits would be iron. So a lot of times what happens, especially if we're new to Planet Aquariums, we get this kind of vibe in our mind of like, well, fertilizer's good, more fertilizer's better. With Easy Green, our own Easy Green, it has some iron in it, but it doesn't have a ton of iron. One, because we don't want to create a lot of algae. Two, because we can't physically get that into the mix. So a lot of people will buy the Easy Iron to go along with it, but then they start dosing both in an aquarium that doesn't really need that excess iron, or you've got like a well at your home, or just a water source that has a lot of iron in it, and that can get us into our own problems of, we didn't know we had a bunch of iron, now we're adding more iron to it. And one of the quick and easy ways to spot that would be, wow, I've got hair algae all the time going on. So yeah, you got to watch out for that. That's a real visual, easy sign. One common theme I see is when someone is testing their water, let's say every 2 weeks or every week, they feel like they're safe. The problem with that is that we test the same parameters every week. We're pretty much testing ammonia, nitrite, nitrate, pH, maybe hardness, and not too much after those 5, right? We get into this false sense of security. So for instance, it would be like me stepping on the scale every morning and going, hey, I haven't gained weight. Okay, we're doing all right. The reality is that's not a good metric on how healthy I actually am, or whether, cancer's developing in me, or if I'm getting a diabetes, or I'm gonna get the flu, or it really has no bearing. But because we are watching something and it's not getting worse, we assume that everything else is in line with that. We're watching those parameters by testing, and we're not really looking at phosphate, we're not looking at iron, we're not looking at CO2 buildup, we're not looking at lack of oxygen, and a lot of times we're not giving a close eye to maybe diseases, aggression, all these other things, because we basically go like, oh, it says here our stuff's good. We're not spending the time to make sure it is good. We will know, like, our dog or our cat is sick or something's wrong with it, and that's how we know to take it to the vet, right? Like with us, our dogs sleep in our bed. We're so close to those dogs every single day of our lives that when something is off, we notice it. And with our aquariums, we should be able to do that as well. But if we take the dog to the vet, right? So imagine this scenario, and it's totally plausible. Take the dog to the vet for a checkup on Monday. Vet checks it out, looks good. By Thursday, the dog's having, heart problems or something, but we go, just went to the vet, and so, this dog is fine. Going to the vet or checking our water parameters has literally no bearing on whether that dog's gonna have a heart attack, or that heater's gonna fail, or we overfed. Because just because we test our water and it's great on Monday, doesn't mean we haven't really screwed it up by Wednesday. Fish aren't eating. What does that mean to me? So if I go to feed a fish and they don't eat, and they ate the day before, and they've never missed a meal except for today. I just wasn't hungry. Like, yeah, kind of like your dog. Your dog doesn't really just do, just not hungry today. Like, we feed our dogs at 5 o'clock. At 4:30, they're doing the dinner dance already. Like clockwork, you can set a clock to them knowing. Fish are the same way, right? So when they don't eat, that should be a clue of, hold on, what's going on? I gotta start looking at stuff, right? That's what it should mean to you. One of the first things I recommend is examine the food. Once this package of food is open, the clock starts. The minute I take the top off of this, it's like opening a bag of chips, right? We've got flake food, we've got chips. You open that bag. How long do you think you can feed those chips or eat those chips before they go stale? Maybe a couple of weeks if you're, putting the top back on and keeping it good. Now imagine that we have all these fish oils and that type of thing that can go rancid. Like, oh, geez. Okay, we should be putting that in the fridge, really? Right? We might only get a week out of that. And we're doing that continually with our fish. Too often people will buy the giant bag going, well, this will last my fish 6 months and it's a better deal than the smaller bag. Every day as I open this up, right, I'm letting in new oxygen, grabbing some food, feeding the fish, then I seal it back up. Every day we're losing nutrients out of here. In extreme cases, we can actually get funguses, bacteria, the oils going rancid. Yes, there's preservatives, but at a certain point we push past that, right? We put preservatives in our food all the time. We can push way past that. First things I look at when a fish isn't eating is, hold on a second, how long have I had this food? Take this with a grain of salt of, I'm a guy that sells fish food, but in my personal opinion, in a perfect world, all foods would be used up within 1 month of opening them. But I'm a realist here and I get that, like, well, I only have 2 aquariums, no package of fish food can I use up in a week or 2. Like, I get it. Like, I totally get that. So again, we have a fish that's not eating. Maybe they're not eating frozen bloodworms. One of the most likely cases, you're feeding your bloodworms and one day you just you set them down on the counter, you went and fed, and then the dog got out and you did a thing, and pretty soon you came back and it's been 22 minutes. And they're half thawed, or maybe even more than half thawed. We don't really think about it. We take that metal package, we put it back in the freezer, but now we're constantly refreezing that and we can get a lot of spoilage going on there. In a perfect world, you take your frozen foods out right at the freezer and you put the package right back in. These are all signs. One of the things why your fish might not be eating is food that is expired, gone bad. Let's make sure the food we are offering is palatable to them and they would want to eat it. The next thing we would look for, I personally would look for, is aggression. So African cichlids, apistogrammas, angels, anything with kind of a little bit of an attitude to it, it's very common for them to shun a fish, right? And so you might be feeding and everyone's frenzying, but Larry in the corner is not eating anymore, and it might be because every time he comes out, he gets chased. So if I knew the food was good, I would look towards an aggression issue. Like, is there, A, am I keeping fish that might show aggression? B, do I see any aggression? C, did I get food back to that fish? If that fish, is here and the food lands right in front of it, still doesn't want to eat, and all the other fish on the other side of the tank, probably not an aggression thing right there. Still could be, but probably not. Then I would look towards environmental factors. Is it warm enough, right? Is the pH okay? Is there any bubbles? Like, do we have ammonia? Or could it be a med in the water? Like, what could be going on here? And the reality is, there are a lot of things that could be putting Larry in the corner. Shadows. So if we're making a shadow on the aquarium because we're backlit, we've got light behind us, maybe overhead lighting in the ceiling, you're feeding your fish and you create a shadow on the tank, sometimes we're scaring them. Could also be a lighting thing in general, right? Maybe we have clown loaches or catfish that would much rather have subdued lighting. So subdued means lower light, and they don't want to come out and eat until the lighting is lower. So we can be doing all these things that we don't think have a big effect, but actually could have very big effects.
We hope you enjoyed this video. To watch another one just like this, click here.